They slammed me face first into the pavement, handcuffed a blind old man like a dangerous criminal. All because I reached for a weapon, but I was only reaching for my cane. And when my former SEAL brothers showed up to clear my name, everything the police said was exposed as a cruel lie. That day, they pushed my face into the cold pavement like I was nothing, just another vagrant. Another threat, another body to subdue. I could feel the grit of the sidewalk grind against my cheek, the taste of dirt and shame filling my mouth as the cuffs snapped too tight around my wrists. "Stop resisting," one of them barked. Though I had not moved an inch, I could not. I did not know where I was facing. I could not see, because I was blind. My name is Luther James. I am 78 years old. I live alone in a worn-down apartment in East Baltimore. 2 blocks from the church I walk to every morning. I lost my sight in 1986 during a mission in Barrett. A grenade tore through the side of a wall where I was shielding 2 civilians. I never saw the flash, but I felt the fire, felt the silence when my eyes stopped working. I came back a hero. At least that is what the papers said. But medals do not pay rent. And honor does not mean anything when you are just another old black man walking through a city that forgot your name. This morning was like any other. I had my cane in one hand, my Bible in the other. I took the same route I always took up Holland's, past the bakery. Turn left at the corner with the broken stoplight. But I guess the construction they started yesterday must be shifted the sidewalk. I must be wandered a little too far out of the pedestrian lane. That is when I heard the shouting. "Hey, step back. You can TB here." Then, a hand on my chest. Rough. Shoving. I said, "Step back." I tried to explain. "Sir, I can TC. I am." "Yeah, you blind and stupid." Before I could say another word, my cane was knocked from my hand. It clattered somewhere behind me. And the next thing I knew, I was being tackled from the side. Hard. My knees gave out. My Bible skidded across the sidewalk. The air was knocked out of my lungs, and I tasted blood. A knee drove into my back. Elbows pinned me like I was a threat to national security. People were yelling. Phones were out. I could hear them filming. One woman's voice cut through the noise. High. Breathless. Furious. "Why are you doing this? He is blind. He is a veteran. I know this man." A pause. Then the cop's voice again cold. Dismissive. "Madam. Step back." This man was as resisting. "We have reason to believe he is carrying something." "What? Are you insane?" Another voice joined in, an older man. "That is Luther James. He is a decorated Navy SEAL. For God's sake. He saved my brother in Nam." None of it mattered. I lay there. Heart pounding. Ears ringing. Not from fear, but humiliation. And something deeper. Something that had been growing quietly inside me for years. Something I tried to ignore. This country forgot me. It used me. It paraded me in a uniform when I was young and strong. But now that I am old, disabled, and poor, it does not see me. Or worse, it sees me and decides I am a threat. They hauled me to my feet. My wrists ached. My shoulder screamed. I stumbled because I could not find my footing, because they would not tell me where to step. The officer, I would later learn his name was Scott Bames, dragged me toward the cruiser like I was drunk or on drugs. That is what he put in the report later. Subject appeared disoriented, refused verbal commands, attempted to reach for Officer S. firearm. They lied. They lied, and I could not even see it coming. The woman Deborah, I would learn, kept yelling. He did not do anything. But they threatened her too. Obstruction of justice. They warned. She went silent. But I felt her gaze burning into the back of my head as the car door slammed shut behind me. Inside the cruiser, I sat in darkness, not just from my eyes, but from something heavier. I thought about the last time I was in the dark like this, kneeling in a warehouse in Ramadi, blood dripping from my temple, praying that the rescue team would find us before the insurgents came back. But even then, even surrounded by enemies, I would never felt helpless like this, because back then I was still a soldier. Now I was just an old blind man no one would believe. The station was cold, sterile. The officers laughed as they typed their reports. One joked about how I should be brought a guide dog. Another muttered something about welfare leeches. They did not know anything about me, didn't care to. I was fingerprinted, photographed, shoved into a holding cell. No call. No lawyer. No one told me what charges I was facing until hours later. Assaulting an officer. They said. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound startled me. It did not sound like me. It sounded like someone broken. Assault. I whispered, I am blind. Save it for the judge, came the reply. Hours passed. Maybe days. It felt like both. My cell smelled like bleach and rust. I could not tell if it was day or night. No windows. Just silence in my thoughts. I wondered if this was how I would die. Then, one night, maybe the third, maybe the fourth, I heard footsteps. Then a low voice. You are Luther James. I nodded. Confused. Sir, I am Deborah Coleman. We met years ago at the church. You helped my son get a scholarship. You probably do not remember, but I remember you. I did not say anything. I am going to get you out of here. I promise. I still did not speak, because a part of me had stopped believing in promises. But something about her voice, something in the way she said it. I wanted to believe her. She leaned closer and whispered. I called Steve Mackenzie. He was your commanding officer, was not he? Now my heart did stop. Steve? I had not heard that name in 30 years. She smiled. He is on his way. Then she was gone. And for the first time in years, maybe in decades, I felt something I had not dared feel in a long time. Hope. My name is Luther James. I was born in 1945, in the deep, humid heat of Montgomery, Alabama. When being born black meant you came into the world already carrying a burden. I carried mine quietly. My mother raised me with dignity. My father never came back from Korea, but I never blamed him for that. Some wars, you lose more than just soldiers. You lose whole generations of peace. When I was 20, I enlisted in the Navy. Not because I was patriotic. Not then. Not because I wanted to fight. I wanted to escape. The South was choking me. Slowly, with every no, boy, and every side glance in stores I was not allowed to enter. So I joined the Navy and shipped out, never looking back. The Navy taught me how to disappear, how to observe, how to kill. Eventually, they put me through SEAL training. Class 34, one of only 3 black men in the entire unit. They broke our bodies, pushed us through hell, and then dropped us into deeper pits to see if we would climb back out. I did. Every time. I served in 3 wars. I rescued hostages from burning compounds. I dragged wounded comrades through enemy fire. I have killed men I never saw again, and I have saved others who cried into my arms like children. I have medals, so many medals. They sit in a dusty drawer beneath my sink, next to unopened bills and expired medicine. The world does not care about medals. Medals do not pay rent. Medals do not stop police hands from pinning you down on concrete while strangers record you on phones. I lost my vision in 1986. We were in Barrett. Our mission was extraction intel, said a U.S. journalist was being held in a collapsed building surrounded by armed insurgents. It was supposed to be a quick in and out, but intel lied. We got ambushed. A grenade bounced through the hole in the roof and exploded 2 feet from me. Shrapnel shredded the right side of my face. My left eye went black instantly. The right one followed a week later, when the infection took root despite everything the doctors tried. I woke up blind, and I stayed that way. At first, the Navy promised support, rehabilitation, honor, but soon the calls stopped. The reporters stopped showing up, and I was just a blind black vet in a wheelchair trying to figure out how to make his way to the bathroom without hitting a wall. I got stronger, trained my ears, learned to walk again, moved to Baltimore, where the VA covered a tiny apartment on the edge of a crumbling block. The kind of neighborhood where good people live quiet lives and hope the noise of the world passes them by. And every morning, I walked to church. Not because I was religious, though I guess I became that later, but because it gave my life a shape, a purpose, a path. There is peace in routine, especially when the world outside has none. I kept to myself. I never asked for help. When people passed me on the street, some would nod politely, others would turn away, but I did not mind. You learn to listen more when you can see. The voices told me more than faces ever could. That is why I knew, the moment that officer approached me the other day, that something was wrong. His voice did not sound like concern. It sounded like judgment, like accusation. He did not see an old blind man. He saw a problem, a threat, something to neutralize. And when his hands grabbed me, when he forced me down to the pavement with brute force and zero patience, I did not resist, not because I was complying, but because I did not know where to go, what to do. I could not even orient my body. His knee crushed into my spine before I could finish a single sentence. And the part that hurts the most, I have been trained in 50 ways to kill a man, but I was powerless. Not because I could not fight, but because if I had tried, if I had even flinched, my name would be ended up on a list like so many others. Another story they twist on the news. Blind veteran turns violent. Suspect lunges. Officer feared for his life. No, I stayed down. I stayed still. And still they lied. That holding cell was smaller than the bunks I would slept in underwater during submarine drops. But colder. More cruel. There was no purpose in it, only punishment. They left me there without explanation, without a voice, as if my blindness made me less of a witness. It took me 3 days to remember what I was fighting for, and her voice reminded me. Deborah. She would have been a teenager when I first met her. I used to give community talks at the church youth nights back when I could still see a little. I remembered her because she asked the toughest questions. Why should we trust a system that never protected us? She once asked. And I would answered, we do not. We change it from the inside. Now, she had become that change. I heard her heels click into the hallway, heard her clear her throat. The air changed when she entered. She smelled like lavender and determination. Her voice shook when she spoke, but not from fear, from rage. You do not deserve this, Ma. Luther, I have seen the footage. They are hiding something. I nodded, barely able to breathe. I have reached out to someone. You remember Lieutenant Mackenzie. That name hit me like a bullet, except instead of pain, it lit something inside me. Steve Mackenzie was my commanding officer for almost a decade. A white boy from Wyoming with an accent like dry grass and eyes that saw everything. We would saved each other's lives more than once. After I went blind, he was the only one who visited the hospital more than once. He cried when he saw me. He held my hand and said, "You are still the sharpest SEAL I know." I never saw him again after that. But Deborah had found him. He is flying in tonight, she said softly. And he is not coming alone. I sat back against the cold wall. I felt a tear run down my cheek, not from fear, but because for the first time in years, I was not alone. The world had decided I was expendable. But maybe, just maybe, my brothers had not, and they were coming. The station had gone quiet overnight. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the scratch of pens against clipboards, and occasionally, the impatient click of a younger officer's gum. I sat on the cold bench inside my holding cell, hands folded tightly in my lap, counting each second by the rhythm of my heartbeat. They did not feed me the first night. No one checked in. I was not read my rights until well after midnight. When someone finally did come, he did not say his name. He just said, "We are still processing you." Processing. Like meat, like a number. I would fought for this country in deserts and jungles. I would seen friends bleed out under my hands, whispering names of wives they would never kiss again. But somehow, here handcuffed in a city I thought was home, I felt more invisible than I ever had on the battlefield. They did not recognize me, and not just the uniformed officers. The neighborhood had changed too. Back in the early 2000s, when I first moved to East Baltimore, it was mostly working-class folks. Black families. Single mothers. Some veterans like me trying to stay afloat. People nodded at each other on porches, passed casseroles to the new tenant next door. There was a sense of quiet pride. We did not have much, but we had each other. Now the block's been flipped. Gentrified, they call it. The brick buildings got new paint. The rent tripled. The corner stores turned into organic cafes. And the people who smiled at me gone, replaced by younger faces who look at me like I wandered into the wrong movie set. Like I am a relic from a story they did not bother to learn. They do not see a man who served. They do not see a neighbor. They see a threat, an inconvenience. And the officers here, they reflect the neighborhood now. Officer Scott Baines, he is not much older than my grandson would be been. 28, maybe 30, square jaw, slick hair, eyes that skim over you like a barcode scanner. I heard him speaking to another officer when I was first brought in, another one pretending to be helpless. He laughed. Blind. My ass. You see the way he reached out. He was going for something. Yeah. The other one snorted. Could V had a blade in that cane. My cane. The same one I used to find my way to the church, to the grocery store. The one I have had for years. White with a red tip. Fiberglass. No compartments. No weight. Just a tool for the blind. And now, apparently, potential weapon. They never checked it for prints. They never checked the video. They never asked me for my side. They just filed their reports, paraded their lies, and prepared to bury me under their paperwork. But they underestimated something. I am not alone. At 2:14 p. on my third day in custody, something changed. I felt it before I heard it. A shift, a tension in the air like before a storm. Boots hit the floor, not police issue. Heavier. Purposeful. Excuse me. Someone barked from the front desk. This is a secure facility. Then silence. A voice I had not heard in decades, gravelly, calm, with steel beneath it. Lieutenant Commander Steve Mackenzie. Retired. You are holding Luther James. We are here to see him. It felt like time stopped. I rose from the bench. Knees stiff. My hands were shaking not from fear, from memory. I heard the low murmur of surprise ripple through the room. Then another voice, this one deeper and warmer. They are scared. Brother, I can feel it. That was Curtis Big Mac McClendon, 6'5". Georgia born, heart like a lion. The last time I saw him, he was pulling a wounded corporal out of a crashed convoy, bullets singing past his ear, and Raymond Torres. My shadow, the quietest seal I ever met, with reflexes like a panther. He did not speak much, but when he did, people listened. Now they were all here. My team. My family. Sir, one officer stammered. We have procedures. You had 3 days. Steve said, now it is my turn. They were not loud. They did not need to be. Presence speaks louder than volume, and Navy SEALs do not bluff. Within minutes, my cell door creaked open. I stepped out, slow and steady. The hallway was dead silent. I could not see the expressions on their faces, but I heard the tension, heard the discomfort, the shuffling of boots, the absence of laughter. Curtis stepped forward, placed a strong hand on my shoulder, still got that same stubborn jawline. He chuckled. I smiled. Steve cleared his throat. We reviewed the footage. The real footage, Raymond added quietly. They edited the bodycam before submitting it to internal review. Steve continued. but they forgot the cruiser's external dash footage uploads to a cloud server. I blinked. You saw it? I asked. All of it. Steve replied. You never moved toward him. You were reaching for your cane. That Officer Baines, he tackled you without provocation, then lied under oath. I felt my breath hitch. They would lied. But now, someone knew the truth. Deborah stepped into the hallway behind them. Her voice wavered, but she stood tall. I leaked the original footage to the press. It will air tonight. My knees nearly gave out. I gripped Curtis' arm, steadying myself. For 3 days, I would felt like a ghost, but now the fog was lifting. Steve turned to the station commander. You will release Luther immediately, or you will answer to the Department of Defense and every veteran rights group we know. The commander said nothing, but the keys were in my hands 5 minutes later. Outside, the sun hit my skin like a blessing. I stood there, blind but finally seen, and somewhere deep in my chest, where all the hurt and rage had lived for too long, something new began to bloom. Not revenge, not hate, justice. And it was just beginning. They said I reached for his gun. Let that sink in. A 78-year-old blind man scarred, limping, walking with a cane somehow threatened a trained officer in broad daylight, surrounded by witnesses, and tried to disarm him. That was the official report, signed by Officer Scott Baines, approved by his supervising sergeant, and entered into the city system by 4:37 p. The day of my arrest. Fabricated, word for word. They said I growled. They said I tensed my shoulders, looked agitated, and grabbed toward Baines' waist holster in what they described as a lunging motion. I do not even know what direction he was standing when he grabbed me. I never touched his weapon. I could not have. My right hand was clutching my Bible, my left holding my cane until it was ripped from me. Even if I could see, why would I? Why would a blind man try to take a cop's gun? But this is what happens when fear writes the truth, when power edits the footage, when men like Baines believe their badge makes them invincible. After my release, thanks to Steve and the team, I was free but not cleared. Not yet. The charges were still pending. I was out of jail, but I was not safe. They could still prosecute, still smear my name. But now we had something they did not expect. Truth, and men willing to fight for it. Steve was not a man of many words, but when he sat across from me that afternoon, in Deborah's living room, his silence held the weight of war. They have done this before, he finally said, voice low. To others like me. I asked. To others they thought no one would defend. Raymond pulled up the footage again on his tablet. He would downloaded both versions, the official one and the raw and unedited clip. Watching them side by side made my stomach churn. In the department's version, the camera jerks right before Baines tackles me, cutting out the part where I stumble and reach down after my cane. The audio crackles right when I say, "Sir, I can TC," and the frame freezes just long enough to blur the scene. In the raw footage, everything's clear. I am walking slowly. Carefully, I hear Baines shout. I stop, raise my hand. I say, I am blind. He rushes, grabs me, slams me. No threat. No aggression. Just brutality. Why would they alter this? Deborah asked, eyes wide. Because if you are blind, you are not dangerous, Raymond said quietly. But if you are a threat, they can justify anything. Steve leaned back. He fits their profile. Older, black, disabled, alone. They did not expect a fight. They picked the wrong soldier. Curtis muttered. That is when we decided this was not just about clearing my name. It was about exposing the system that let this happen. Deborah had already started the paperwork for a civil rights complaint, but Steve had bigger plans. We bring this to court, yes, but also to the people, the media, the streets. If we stay quiet, they win. He contacted veteran groups. Raymond reached out to journalists. Curtis called every soldier we would ever saved, every Gold Star family who owed someone in our unit their lives. And people responded. Within 48 hours, #Justice for Luther was trending. Major networks started calling. Deborah was interviewed on local news. Even the mayor's office released a generic statement about investigating police procedures, which meant they were scared. But Baines, he doubled down. At a press conference, he stood in his pressed uniform, surrounded by American flags and Sullis officials, and declared, "I followed protocol. I feared for my life. We cannot allow lawlessness even disguised as disability." That was the final straw. We called a press conference of our own. In the church I walked to every day before my arrest. Deborah stood at the podium, Steve beside her, me seated in front. Sunglasses on, hands folded. Heart pounding. When she played the real footage on the projector, you could hear the gasps, the disbelief, the silence. When Steve took the mic, he spoke not as a civilian, but as a commander. Luther James served this country with honor. He was blinded in combat while rescuing civilians. He bled for your freedom. And 3 days ago, your city threw him to the ground like trash because one man with a badge decided his fear mattered more than the truth. The crowd erupted. Reporters flooded the church steps. Protesters showed up at the precinct. The mayor's phone lines jammed. That night, we sat around Deborah's kitchen table in disbelief. I never thought they would listen. I whispered, "They are not listening." Steve said, "Yet, but they are watching." And now, they can look away. And just like that, for the first time since my arrest, I slept. Not deeply. Not peacefully, but without shame. Because I knew we were finally fighting back. The city was buzzing, but inside Deborah's home, we moved like shadows. We did not scream. We did not chant in the streets. We did what soldiers do before battle. We gathered intelligence. We prepared, and we waited. This was not just about me anymore. It had not been for days. It was about every man and woman who had been silenced by lies in a badge, every veteran discarded when their usefulness expired, and every black life labeled dangerous for merely existing. But change did not come from fury alone. It had to be earned. Documented, built like a case file ready to explode. Steve took the lead. He converted Deborah's dining room into a mission control center. Old maps came out. A timeline was drawn. Evidence pinned with tacks and string, just like back in the war zones. Curtis brought muscle, sure, but also contacts. He reached out to attorneys, civil rights veterans, former military court judges, people who owed him favors from decades past. Raymond, silent and surgical, was our ghost. He infiltrated the police department's public records, cross-referenced complaints against Officer Baines, pulled reports of use of force incidents that had been mysteriously dismissed. There were too many. Too similar. Too perfect to be coincidence. Deborah, meanwhile, became the heart of the movement. She handled press requests, set up interviews, created a support network of people who had been mistreated by Baines or others like him. They sent videos, documents, letters, some anonymous, some terrified. One letter hit me like a gut punch. It was from a young mother. She wrote, "He pulled my son over for a broken taillight. My son was 17. He made him get on the ground, slammed his face into the gravel. We never reported it. We were afraid. But now, because of you, we are not anymore." That is when I realized what we were doing was not just resistance. It was redemption. Had spent years quietly accepting the shadows, living like I did not deserve more. I thought silence was strength, but silence is where injustice thrives. I still could not see the faces around me, but I felt them. The weight of them. The people in that house did not see me as a blind old man. They saw me as a soldier again, as someone worth standing behind. Every day brought a new headline. Retired Navy SEAL accused of assaulting police officer. Then, bodycam footage reveals possible cover-up. And then finally, Baltimore peed under. Federal review following SEAL veteran arrest. The department scrambled. The mayor launched an independent investigation. Baines was placed on administrative leave. But we knew what that meant. Vacation. But we were not done. Steve planned something bigger. We filed a civil lawsuit Monday. He said, "And then, we bring this to court not just for damages. For history." I hesitated. "You think they will let me speak? You earned the right." He said, "Every scar on your body says so." We were not naive. We knew what we were up against. Institutions do not crumble just because you shout at their walls. They are built to last, to deflect blame, to survive scandal. But now we had more than accusations. We had evidence. We had witnesses. And most importantly, we had each other. That weekend, I visited the church for the first time since my arrest. Deborah guided me down the sidewalk. I felt nervous, exposed, but as we approached the front steps, I heard the soft clapping. Not loud, not theatrical, just a slow, steady rhythm, hands clapping together, one by one, as people rose to their feet. Elderly, parishioners, children, strangers. I stopped. Deborah squeezed my arm. "They see you now," she whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat, and then I stepped through the doors. My body still ached, my eyes still failed me, But for the first time in a long, long time, my soul stood tall, because justice was not coming. It was already here. We just had to finish what we started. It was a courtroom, but it felt like a battlefield. The walls were white, clean, unassuming, designed to hold silence. Not truth. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a crisp navy blazer, medals pinned across my chest for the first time in years, not because I needed to show them who I was, but because they had forgotten. Curtis sat to my left, fists tight, Raymond on my right, scanning the room like he always did, every corner, every expression, every twitch. Deborah stood behind us with her hands clenched, but her chin high. Steve stood, pacing in front, prepared like he was back in the field, briefing for a mission that could not afford to go wrong. And Officer Scott Baines. He strutted in late, pressed blues, aviators tucked into his pocket like this was just another day of power. He did not look at me, didn't need to. His smirk said it all. But today, he had no badge to hide behind, no department to rewrite the story for him. Today, he faced the one enemy he could not tackle. The truth. The judge entered Honorable Miriam Godfrey. Older, white, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, known for holding the line. She glanced at the courtroom, then at me, then said, "Let us proceed." Steve opened, calm, steady. He laid out the facts. My record, my service, the footage, the edits, the media pressure, the public reaction. Then he did something I did not expect. He played a recording, Baines' own radio chatter from that day. "Yeah, I have got some guy here. Blackmail, old, possibly intoxicated, wandering near the construction site, could be faking blind, send backup just in case." You could hear the courtroom exhale, then gasp. Faking blind, even before he saw me, before I said a word, before I did anything wrong. They objected. Of course they did. Claimed the recording was incomplete, taken out of context, inadmissible. But the judge allowed it. Then Steve called his first witness, the city sonnet technician, a middle-aged white man in a wrinkled shirt who did not look like he wanted to be here. "Sir," Steve asked, "can you explain why the bodycam footage submitted to the day differs from the footage uploaded to the cloud server?" The technician fumbled. There was a sensing issue. A corruption. Is that common? No, sir. Have you ever seen a case where only the 10 seconds showing the initial contact were corrupted? A pause. No. Then Steve called the second witness, and the courtroom fell into a hush. Lieutenant Commander Stephen Mackenzie. Retired. Wes. Navy. Steve took the stand in full uniform. When asked how he knew me, he did not hesitate. "Luther James is the reason I am alive. I owe him my life. My children owe him their father." He looked directly at Baines. "And if this is how this city treats its heroes, then every soldier in America should be terrified." Baines tried to defend himself, took the stand, voice suddenly meek. He talked about fear, about confusion, about reasonable suspicion. but when Steve cross-examined him, everything unraveled. You stated the subject reached for your gun, but in this footage he hit play. We clearly see him reaching down. Why did you say otherwise? I believed he was reaching for something. You mean like his cane? Baines hesitated. It happened fast. Did it happen fast when you reported him as possibly intoxicated before even speaking to him? Silence. You ever serve? Officer Baines. No. You ever get blown up pulling a child out of a war zone? No. Steve stepped closer. Then maybe you should learn to salute a man like Luther James, not slam him into the ground. The crowd in the gallery gasped. The judge called for order, and I sat frozen, because the moment had shifted. For the first time, the weight I would carried for decades was being lifted by my brothers, by strangers, by a courtroom that, for once, was listening. But the twist had not even landed yet. Not until the final witness. Steve called someone unexpected. Your Honor, I would like to bring forward one final witness. A surprise. A man who has remained silent until now. The doors opened. A tall figure entered. Gray suit. Bald head. Slow gait, a scar across his cheek I had not seen in nearly 40 years. Colonel Henry Dawes. He had been our superior officer during our final tour, a man of few words. Fierce loyalty, and a memory like iron. He took the stand, raised his hand, swore in. Then he said 7 words that flipped the room upside down. I trained Officer Baines in tactical restraint. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He continued. He attended a special civilian police outreach seminar 3 years ago, where we taught de-escalation using disabled veteran simulations. Luther's name was used as a case study. His blindness, his injury, his story. Steve stood frozen. You are saying Officer Baines knew who Mayor James was? Dawes nodded solemnly. Yes. He even asked if he could have a copy of the footage for personal training. The courtroom erupted. It was not just negligence anymore. It was targeted. He knew who I was, and he tackled me anyway. The courtroom was chaos. People stood, shouted, gasped. The judge slammed her gavel, calling for order over and over again, but nothing could stop the flood of fury sweeping through the gallery. It was like a dam had broken, like the air itself had changed the moment Colonel Dawes revealed the truth. He knew who I was. Officer Scott Baines did not just see a random old black man that day. He saw me a decorated Navy SEAL, a man whose face had been used in police seminars, a blind veteran who had been used as a training example for de-escalation. And he tackled me anyway. On purpose, with full knowledge, and then lied. The judge's voice finally cut through the noise like a blade. Order. I will have order in this courtroom, or I will clear it. Slowly, the gallery settled. My hands were trembling in my lap, not from fear, not even from rage. From clarity. Everything made sense now. I turned my face toward Baines, even if I could not see his reaction. But I could feel him squirming under the weight of the truth. His breathing changed. No more cocky posture. No more smirks. He was unraveling. Baines, the judge said slowly, "You were given the chance to speak honestly. But this court now has reason to believe you perjured yourself multiple times. Do you wish to revise your testimony?" His lawyer grabbed his arm, but Baines did not speak. He could not. The silence became its own confession. The prosecution, who had once moved forward with charges against me, now turned their heads down, ashamed. You could see it in their faces. They had played too. Used, manipulated by a man with a badge who thought no one would challenge him. But I was not alone anymore. Deborah squeezed my shoulder from behind, whispering, "We did it, and we had." But it was not over. The judge recessed for an hour to review the final findings. We waited outside in the hot Baltimore sun, surrounded by reporters, by strangers shaking my hand, by mothers bringing their children forward just to say, "Thank you." Steve leaned in. "When we go back in, you will speak me." He nodded. "It is time they heard your voice. Not ours. Not theirs. Yours." I had not addressed a room like that since my military days, and even then, I always kept it brief. But something in me had changed. I was not just the victim anymore. I was the witness. The hour passed like a slow bleed. When the courtroom reconvened, the judge did not sit right away. She stood behind the bench, looking down at us not with distance, but with gravity. "This court has reviewed the evidence, including the altered footage, the radio call, and the testimony of Colonel Dawes, the behavior of Officer Scott Baines, both during and after the incident, constitutes not only a gross misuse of force, but a premeditated act of deception and abuse of power." She looked at me. "James, would you like to address the court?" I stood. My knees wobbled for half a second. Then I found my breath. "My name is Luther James. I served this country for over 2 decades. I lost my sight protecting civilians from a grenade that did not know color, creed, or country. I came back to a nation that clapped for me, awarded me, and then slowly, quietly, forgot me." I paused. The room was silent. That officer did not act out of fear. He acted out of judgment. He saw someone he did not respect, someone he thought no one would defend. He thought I was alone, but I never was. I had brothers. I had this community. I had truth. A tear slipped from beneath my glasses, hot and bitter. Justice is not something you stumble into. You fight for it. And I will keep fighting, not just for me, but for every voice that has been silenced by fear wrapped in a uniform. I sat down. The judge nodded once. "In light of these findings, this court recommends criminal charges be filed against Officer Baines for perjury, assault, falsifying reports, and obstruction of justice." Gasps. Again, the gavel hit wood. "This hearing is adjourned." And just like that, it was done. But what came next was something I will never forget. As we exited the courthouse, the crowd outside had grown. News vans, veterans in full uniform, families, teachers, strangers. As I stepped down the marble steps, someone started to clap. Then another. Then dozens. Hundreds. I stopped in my tracks, not because I could not go forward, but because I did not need to. Curtis whispered, "They are saluting you, brother." And even though I could not see it, I felt it. All around me, a city standing tall, a people reclaiming dignity, and a country, however flawed, remembering the face of a man it once forgot. They called it a local trial, but by morning, it was national news. I did not own a television, but I could hear it on every channel through the cracked windows of Deborah's living room. Reporters reading my name like was holy, headlines scrolling across the bottom of screens. Blind veteran cleared, officer faces charges. Hero or threat, nation reacts to CLS ordeal. I sat quietly, hands folded on my lap, listening. They talked about my record, my service, my age, my injuries. They replayed the footage over and over again. Each time it aired, it ripped the lie further apart. But what moved me most were the voices. People from across the country calling in. A woman in Detroit. My grandfather was in Korea. This hurts to watch. I am so sorry, sir. A young man from Arizona. I am a cop, and I am ashamed of what they did to you. A teacher from Georgia. We are sharing your story with our 8th graders today. They are writing letters to you. I wept, not from grief, but because I realized this was not just about me anymore. My pain had become their mirror. My survival, their rallying cry. Steve, Curtis, and Raymond remained by my side. They would not leave Baltimore until they knew I was safe physically, legally, and emotionally. We were brothers, always had been. The war might have ended decades ago, but they still had my 6. Deborah, tireless and glowing with purpose, handled every interview request, every message, every donation that poured in from people I would never met. One morning, she read me a letter from a little boy in Nebraska who wrote, "Dear Mayor James, my dad said you are very brave. I want to be like you when I grow up. I am sorry people were mean to you. I hope your eyes feel better someday. Love, Logan." That one broke me. I asked Deborah if she could frame it. She smiled and said, "Already done." Outside, the church bells rang for the first time in weeks. The whole block had been eerily quiet since my arrest, like even the city was holding its breath. But now, kids played again in the streets. Neighbors waved, and someone had tied a bright red ribbon to my mailbox. The mailman said, "Welcome home, sir." I had not realized it, but I would stopped walking to the church since that day. Not because I was afraid, but because I was not sure I belonged anymore. So that Sunday, I got up early, dressed in full navy blues, ran my hand over the medals one last time, then let Deborah guide me down the front steps. Halfway down the block, I heard it whispers, gasps, then soft clapping. The same sound from the courthouse steps. But warmer, closer. Someone said, "He is going to church." Another voice whispered, "That is him. That is Luther James." When we reached the church steps, the doors opened and the choir stood lined across the entry. They sang, not just for me, but for something bigger, for every injustice they would swallowed, for every story like mine buried under silence. They lifted their voices like they were lifting all of us. Pastor Hill stepped forward. eyes wet, arms open. He said, "Brother James, will you lead us in today?" I paused. My cane tapped gently against the marble. Then I said, "Yes, sir." As I entered the sanctuary, the silence was not empty anymore. It was sacred. That afternoon, back at Deborah's, I asked for a radio. I wanted to hear Bain's press conference. Yes, he was still trying. His new lawyer spun a sob story. Childhood trauma. Implicit bias. Fear. Claimed he had been manipulated apartment policies. Tried to paint himself as a victim. But America was not buying it anymore. The Anchor read a poll. 81% believed Baines should be prosecuted. Over 200,000 signatures had already been collected to support his removal and conviction. The nation was not turning away, not this time. Steve leaned back in the armchair beside me, exhaling slowly. "You know what this means, right?" I nodded. "They are watching." He nodded too. "And they believe." Curtis entered with bags of BBQ from a little joint he found. "Hope you are hungry." "Soldier." "Starving." I laughed. That night, we sat together under the Baltimore stars, eating ribs and corn and drinking sweet tea while laughter echoed off the porch. No sirens, no fear. Just peace. It was fragile, hard-won, but real. And as Raymond passed me another plate, he said something I will never forget. "Sometimes, the mission ain't to fight. It is to be seen." And I finally was. Not as a criminal, not even just as a hero, but as a man. It was a Tuesday morning when I finally returned home alone. The porch creaked under my boots, familiar and solid. I tapped the cane gently along the edge of the wooden steps until I felt the leftmost corner, the one that always caught rain. My fingers found the rail. My shoulder remembered the distance. And just like that, I was home. No escort. No cameras. No uniformed brothers guarding every breath. Just me and the breeze. Someone had cleaned the place. I could smell the lemon oil on the floors, feel the sheets freshly folded on my bed. Deborah's doing? No doubt. Or maybe one of the local kids she would wrangled into helping while I was away. But it was not just the inside that changed. As I stood there on the porch, face toward the rising sun, I noticed something different in the air. Pride, not in me, but in something larger. On my porch railing, someone had left a folded American flag tightly pressed. Corners neat, and pinned beside it, a note in thick Sharpie. "You defended our flag. Now it defends you." There were no signatures, just that line, just that folded cloth. I unfolded it slowly, each crease reminding me of the ceremonies I used to attend, memorials for brothers we never brought home. The way their mothers clutched these flags like they were lifelines. Now it was mine again. I raised it that afternoon. Curtis came by to help me secure the pole. He did not say much, just stood behind me, guiding my hands when I fumbled. Raymond adjusted the height with military precision. Steve held the rope taut. Deborah recorded it quietly, tears in her throat. And when we finally raised it high, letting it flap against the blue Baltimore sky, The neighborhood came out silently to watch. No one spoke, but they did not need to. Because sometimes dignity does not shout, it simply stands. Afterward, we gathered in the yard. Someone brought folding chairs. A local bakery dropped off cornbread and sweet tea. Children ran through sprinklers in the distance, their laughter bouncing off brick walls like music. It felt like a homecoming, not for a soldier, but for a man who had once been forgotten. They gave me a microphone, but I did not need it. I cleared my throat and said, I used to believe silence was survival, that if I kept my head down, kept walking, eventually I would make it to the end in one piece. I paused, listened to the wind dance through the flag. But survival is not living, and silence is not peace. Not when the world forgets who you are. I lifted my chin. Thank you for remembering me. That night, back in my chair, I sat alone as the others drifted away. The city breathed, and for the first time in years, I did not feel like a stranger in my own story. The doorbell rang just before midnight. A boy, maybe 10, maybe 12, stood there nervously. Asian American. Skinny frame, holding a drawing with both hands. No words, just an image of me with my cane, my medals, the flag above me, and behind me, shadows of other veterans holding me upright. He looked up and said quietly, Mom said I should give this to you. I took the paper in my hands, fingers tracing the edges. What is your name? I asked. Ali. Well, Ali, this is the best drawing I have ever received. He beamed. As he turned to go, I said, Hey. He stopped. Promise me something. He nodded. Never stay silent when you see wrong, even if your voice shakes. He looked me in the eye. I promise. And then he ran off into the night, leaving me with the stars and the truth that no matter how broken the system may be, a new generation was watching, learning, changing, and maybe, just maybe, the world was starting to listen. The courtroom may have gone quiet. The officers may have retreated into policy briefings and public apologies. The city may have returned to its rhythms, horns blaring, children laughing, flags rustling. But I knew what we started was not meant to end with me. It was just the first spark. 3 weeks after the case closed, I received a letter from the Department of Justice. They were launching a full civil rights investigation into the Baltimore Police Department. It was not just about Baines anymore. It was about patterns, behavior, silence that had piled up like bricks in a wall too many thought would never crack. But it had, and now sunlight poured through. Steve had gone back to Wyoming, Curtis to Georgia, and Raymond to New Mexico, but they called every other day. We were brothers, yes, but now we were more than that. We were a symbol, veterans who refused to be tokens, soldiers who still fought, not with weapons but with presence, with truth, with each other. Deborah stayed close. She started a nonprofit, the James Initiative, she called it. Their mission, to connect disabled veterans with legal defense and civil rights training. Their motto, you fought for us, we fight for you. She printed it on everything: shirts, posters, bumper stickers, and people wore them. Everywhere I went, I heard someone whisper, "That is him." And sometimes, "Thank you." I did not do it for gratitude or fame. I am too old for that. I did it because I had spent too long in the shadows, and when the light finally came, I saw how many others were still trapped in the dark. If I could be the door, then maybe someone else would find the courage to walk through. The mayor called me 2 months later. She asked if I would be willing to speak at a citywide forum on police reform. I told her yes, but only if Deborah spoke first. She agreed. The night of the event, I wore my medals again, not for show, but for those who never returned home to wear theirs. The hall was packed. Cameras flashed. City council members leaned forward in their chairs, but my voice was steady. I did not read from a paper. I did not need to. I told them what I lived, and I ended with this. Being blind does not mean I can see what is broken, and being old does not mean I can still stand. I fought in foreign lands for freedom, but I was nearly crushed by injustice two blocks from my front door. That must change, and it will, if we stand together, not as civilians or officers, not as politicians or veterans, but as people. Human, equal, accountable. The room stood, not because they were told to, but because they understood. And outside, where the city lights shimmered against the harbor, I heard that same familiar sound again. Clapping. From strangers. From neighbors. From a nation waking up. Now, I sit on my porch in the mornings, cane beside me, Bible on my lap, coffee in hand. The flag above me does not flap alone. It waves beside a new one, the James Initiative logo, stitched in gold and blue. Kids stop by and ask questions. Parents nod as they walk by, and the wind, ever so gently, carries the past into tomorrow, not to forget, but to remind. That one blind man, silenced by a lie, can still light the path forward for millions. That courage, when shared, becomes movement, and that sometimes the loudest revolution begins in the quiet of dignity reclaimed. They arrested a blind old man thinking no one would care. They threw him to the ground, believing no one would stand. But they forgot he was not just a man. He was a soldier, a brother, a voice they could not silence. From a cold cell to the courthouse steps, Luther James showed us that truth has no expiration date and dignity does not disappear just because the world stops looking. He reminded us that real strength is not found in fists or firepower, but in holding your ground when the world tries to erase you. The lesson: no one is too old, too broken, or too small to rise up for what is right. And injustice, no matter how long it hides, can be exposed when good people refuse to stay silent. Whether you are a veteran, a teacher, a child watching from the sidelines, your voice matters, your story matters, and your courage could be the very light someone else is waiting for. If this story moved you, do not let it end here. Like to honor those who've been silenced. Comment below with your thoughts or stories of injustice. Subscribe to hear more voices that deserve to be heard. Share this story with someone who needs to remember. Justice never needed sight, only vision.